Hello.
Hey there, Joy.
Do you know what I recommend today? I recommend that you, if you can, eat a piece of chocolate. It's really nice.
I do that every day.
You do? Oh, that's good. I'm glad.
I'm a fan of the dark chocolate. Not a lot of
I
sugar, but a whole lot of
think I've
chocolate.
met a chocolate that I've let that I didn't. I'm only some of the flavored stuff can get a little weird, but chocolate, man. Well, after lunch, chocolate snack is pretty ace.
I'm waiting for it to get a little bit warmer so I can break into the ice cream.
It's staying like kind of a chilly spring here in Boston. And so the other day, um, in the afternoon, I made myself hot cocoa. Cold. Which I suppose there's no reason that can't be a year-round drink, but still.
Definitely can be, but I tend to reserve for the winter.
Yeah, same.
Gives me something to look forward to when it's cold, and it gives me a reason that I don't feel as bad for all the ice cream I'm having in the summer. Oh, Jeff mentioned they had some stuff to chat about today. He didn't put it on the agenda.
I have things that I owe you. I don't have an update on those things yet. I've just had a little bit of a um hectic couple of weeks. So I don't have anything for today. I have to drop at the half hour though. So if there's anything you want to cover with me, I'll be on till 1:30 ET.
Okay. Yeah, Jeff pinged me on this before showing up or before the meeting, said, "Hey, I want to talk about these two things." I said, "I'm intrigued by at least one of them. So hopefully he will show." I know I've got some stuff that I owe, like on the TOB side, doing some things over there, but I haven't had time to do that myself either. Tarek and Brian simultaneously. Does that mean this is Container D Day?
Yeah, that's exactly what it means.
Every day is Container D Day.
True that. I think we're gonna try to we might switch back the Container D meetings to bi-weekly. We were doing it like monthly.
Mm.
Um, so maybe that means I'll show up to this one more. I'll remember to attend.
Container D Day, OCI Day, then Docker Day. Uh,
Yeah, just get it all done and
it's like
move
5
on.
hours all in one day.
I stopped going to the Moby one, but I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't know. Maybe I should go. I don't know if I'm missing anything, but it is just a little bit too much to have like that long block.
Yep. Sometimes Moby goes way over.
Says everybody trying to have meetings where the hours overlap between US and EU.
We work for Container D, but then we split it, and I think we were talking about
No, we
reintegrating it.
unsplit it. Yeah, we
Yeah.
had it at like 8 a.m. Pacific, and then that was
Yeah. That's a
that
no-go
was
for me
hard. It
always.
wasn't good for anybody. Or yeah, it's like really late in Asia, really early. I guess it's good for European folks. We didn't have any European folks who attend. So it just made it hard for people in Pacific. So we moved it back to 9, but then we had a separate uh Asian Pacific time zone one, but it's basically just a queue that shows up and sometimes me and sometimes one other person. So we're gonna axe that one since Akil seems to show up to this one anyway. So
That was at 9 p.m. Pacific, right?
yeah, well, that was the thing. It was actually pinned to China Standard Time, so like it would switch between like 9 and 8 based on daylight savings since they don't do daylight savings. So that was always fun.
All right. Well, we are 5 minutes after. Other folks might show up later on, but we shouldn't have everybody show up on time for nothing. So I don't have a lot myself, but I know Jeff has some fun stuff to chat about later on. Before we jump into his, we have got a couple things sitting in the backlog, and a few of them, since we've got Derek here, a few of them are over on the distribution spec. Hopefully, at least two of them are easy. And one of them you already gave a review to before, and then I had to rebase it. So sorry
How dare you?
if I can just get someone overwrote a line that I changed and I had to. So
Wait, that someone wasn't you?
it probably wasn't a different PR. I probably changed the header or
Yeah,
something
that
like
sounds
that.
more like it.
Yeah. I mean, of all the people who do it, it's probably me. So yeah, if we can get another one on that, that would be awesome. Conformance stuff, I expect very little considering that I've added 6,000 lines and deleted over 3,600 lines of code in this thing. So whenever folks have a chance, that would be awesome. Just reminding people that one's still sitting out there on the OCI conformance repo itself. If people are comfortable with it, we can go ahead and merge this one before getting the actual tests themselves updated because this interprets from both inputs, regardless of how it comes in. The blog post is going to have to stay until we actually get the conformance test updated. And then the other one that might be an easy one for you is, well, no, not this one. The 1 sentence per line. Although this, I think
Oh,
we
if Jeff
need
tells
someone
me
like
to
Sajid.
merge it, I'll merge it. So just give me the word.
This one, I think I want to spend some time on this one to actually implement it myself. So I've got this on my own backlog to run implementation. Jeff, I gave you a whole bunch of review stuff in there. I didn't put the change required, but I threw a whole bunch of reviews in there. I know you've looked at some of them, but
Yeah, I've
yeah,
looked at some. I'm leaving this as a open discussion item because I think there's several things I need to go back and update anyway.
yeah. And I know at least one of the items I threw in there you want to chat about during the rest regular meeting. So we'll jump into that in a minute. This one, if Sajay jumps on, I didn't check the participants to see if he jumped in. Nope, he didn't. So at this point, we just need one more image spec maintainer to put a review on that. That's a little tiny thing. And that was it for review items. So should be pretty. Hey, Sajay's here. Since he's here, I'm just going to drop this into the chat. When you get a chance, Sajay, dropping that PR into the chat. Be an easy one for a quick review on whenever you get a few minutes there. So, with all that said, Jeff, would you like to take it away because you had pretty much everything to chat about? And I think I captured your two items correctly there.
You did.
Okay.
You did. The first one is more trying to gauge I don't know. Is this even a viable thing since there's not really any extensions defined that I've found anywhere, at least not in the spec. Essentially, this comes down to one of Brandon's comments about the tag history API, essentially pointing back to the way that extensions are defined, where they have to have a component and a module in order to fit that naming. Um, the kind of concern with that is it sort of makes all of the APIs like go against every single best practice that has ever been established around APIs. Um, and so it makes the format really ugly. Like a tag history endpoint, that has a required field of a tag. Like the tag is not part of the path. The tag has to be passed as a query parameter instead of part of the path. So just kind of curious on, is it okay if these APIs just look absolutely gross because it's only tool authors that are implementing against them? and we just accept the fact that they aren't going to follow any sort of standards or best practices, or is there actually appetite to making these more standard and easier to work against?
I'll give my own since no one's jumping in on top of this. I did put the note in there that I think we were overly prescriptive on that whole format that it needed to be, the module and everything else. And from the OCI standpoint, once you go under a namespace with the underscore, if that's your namespace, I feel like you should be able to structure it however you think it makes sense. Just make sure that however you structure it, you don't get into a case where a variable in one thing could overlap with a fixed value in another thing, where you get some kind of API collision. In other words, you don't say that one field has manifest, but the other one has a variable where the value could be a tag that's user provided. So someone can make a user tag called manifest and you have a tag collision that way.
Clearly, this is a hot topic, so.
I'm trying to read it. I don't remember what we even decided on for these extension URLs. I remember us going back and forth and nobody liking anything. So
That
like
sounds kind of normal.
is the underscore OCI, is that just reserved for any extension that we define as part of this spec?
They are reserved by us. So we've said we're going to put stuff under OCI, and then we should be documenting it under the OCI.md file over here of any extensions we define.
I did have a question on that because I think the way that extensions are actually defined, like OCI itself is actually like a specific namespace. Like technically I could also just do underscore tags and just make my own thing entirely, right? Or
You,
is everything that has to do with a registry supposed to be under OCI? Because that part was even a bit unclear.
I feel like if we are going to specify it, we should put it under OCI. If someone else wants to do it themselves and make it themselves, whoever claims namespace first gets to earn it.
Shoot, go register underscore tags. Hurry.
And it would just be Jeff's namespace.
I'm just doing underscore Jeff.
Yeah. Do we have any external definitions of this? I know there was a few thoughts, but
beyond what we have over here in terms of the syntax.
Like
in terms of, other people who define.
I know that
extensions.
some registries have implemented some extensions, but I think they're all, from what I know, they've all been like internal use things. None of them have actually been documented as part of spec.
And I feel like if you're going to do it for yourself, it would be good just to register it, just to say, I own this namespace. I think that would be useful for us just to have that so people aren't stepping on top of each other.
Did anyone define that underscore catalog, or did that get lost in a
Reserved.
We dug up some old documentation from it out of the distribution repo, I think.
Yeah. So Derek, as you're looking through some of that, do you have any thoughts on whether it needs to follow this 3-tier structure, extension component module, or
Well, I just feel like the underscore OCI and then having underscore catalog as the reserves is almost feels immediately inconsistent. Like if OCI is the namespace and then we define everything under that, then that makes sense. But is catalog a component that would get defined under OCI or just a extension author that would be completely
I,
external?
I think catalog is purely listed there for historical thing.
yeah.
Like I don't think it's defined for any use. I think it's more saying there are some
Oh, just somebody
industries that
already
did
uses that.
something, so don't squat on this. It might
Yeah.
have
Gotcha.
some other
We already did it, so don't do it yourself. People are already using this code.
So yeah, looking at chain guard adding some extensions, but under the underscore chain guard. So I think it is, to Brandon's point, maybe if it's going to be defined in spec, it should go under underscore OCI. If it is going to be your own thing, then name it. Maybe you should push back and claim it.
I mean, I could push something and claim chain guard for myself. I don't think chain guard would like it too much.
Yeah,
I guess
squat
I
it.
would hope that would come up in review before it'd be merged in, but maybe not.
Let me look back at Brandon's comment around I feel like after reading that, I'm in agreement about that. Yeah, I think I agree with Brandon's comment that it would be underscore OCI tag history, where
Now, the thing is, I put a query parameter on there as the tag where I think what Jeff is saying is whether we make this a dash or a slash, I don't know you're too picky on that, Jeff, but you want to be able to have the tag. It's just an extra piece of a string.
It was more, yeah, tag is a required field, and so it'd be nice if it was passed as part of the path, not passed as a query
Yeah.
parameter. But the spec as written does not allow for that. And again, like this is mainly a problem for probably tool authors and implementers. Like users wouldn't ever see it, and so if it's ugly, at least it's our ugly that we hide. Um, and so maybe that's fine. I was just curious.
you're saying ugly having having it in query parameters or ugly by just doing slashes against the protocol or against how it's defined.
So I think the debate is whether we're using a query parameter or whether we're using a path element. And
Yeah,
I
I
honestly
find
agree. I tend to agree with Jeff here, where I think it looks cleaner if it is part of the path. So this initial slash dash, I don't think we're chatting about that so much. I think we're just chatting about this latter part. And I wrote it here to align with what our documentation says an extension needs to look like. But I'm not really that picky on that myself. I'm just trying to follow our documentation where if we want to change our documentation to say this is allowed with a path element, I'd be for that too.
yeah, I think my point being is the way the spec as written sort of requires these modules to be static values, not like a dynamic tag name. And so my point being, if you were to just go out and implement your own REST API, you would not pass a required field by query parameter. You would make it as part of the path. Like that's just how APIs are designed. And so the question here was more, is it okay that this spec breaks most every HTTP API convention because like we know that we accept it and we'll just hide it from users, or is there a way to fix that?
Not sure I exactly followed how the what what should be static in that case? Or from a kind of standard HTTP perspective?
In this case, the string tag, history, and OCI are all static. The tag value itself is dynamic. But when we have the three values, the namespace, the, what are we calling it? The components
Component
in the module
module.
here. Yeah, so we got each of these have to be static, so we can't put a tag dynamic string in there for the module name.
But the very example is search, which
But in that example, we put the search is static. The pattern that you're searching for is a query parameter in the example. And to me, I feel like we should standardize underscore extension, whatever your namespace is. After that, it's up to you to come up with what makes most sense. That would be my personal impression. Because once you're under the underscore part of it, you're in your own land, and I really don't care that much. I got a thumbs up from Mike. That's awesome.
Well, I mean, normalization is nice, but it can be too restrictive.
Yeah.
I mean, I think yeah, to your point, like once it's namespaced away, then yeah, that would be that would be my take on it. Would be, yeah, you register an extension and then everything else under there is related. And you can format it as needed because there might, I don't know. I don't know what other things are going to come up here, but some things may not even have a module. Maybe they only have a component level. Maybe some things actually need 3 tiers deep. Like who knows what the future holds.
Yeah, we should only be placing such normalization issues on the OCI extensions.
Even then, I think Jeff is trying to come up with an exception where he wants another field in there that's not a query parameter.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, like I can do the chain guard approach where I just throw in an underscore Docker and then I just implement it however I want. And then like, but I think the goal here is, hey, some like a tag history kind of a thing would be a great thing to have more normalized, or at least more of a normal definition.
So, Jeff, if you want to put a PR out there that softens this language, I would be comfortable reviewing that.
I will take a stab at it. Yeah.
Trying to give a second because I see people on and off mic all over the place. So I don't know who wants to jump in with an idea or not. Going once, going twice.
I'll just jump on and off just to mess with you. So is there a concern here around what if tag is a query parameter that there's no defined result if you do not pass any query parameters?
Yeah, it's a required query parameter. So if it's going to be required, why not make it part of the path?
Okay, I'm
So-
going to take the standpoint of I don't care either way matters or doesn't matter too much. But yeah, I mean I do think the way you have it with tag or yeah, not having it tag dash history or something and having the tag as a component, I think makes sense.
Yeah, I think you and I, Derek, are agreeing on the idea of what should be a component, what should be a module. We just had all the debate on that latter path part. And if you're not picky, and I'm not picky on changing the spec, and Jeff would like to see it changed in the spec side to say we can be a little more flexible, I'm in favor of making it a little more flexible, and that way people that are implementing this stuff, like Chaingar's already done, as he's pointed out in the comment, Chaingar put a tag inside of their path. I think it makes sense. All right, Jeff. Does that give you some guidance there on that one?
It does. Yep.
All righty.
Wait, but theirs is just their component is history and their module is the tag.
They don't have a module. They just put the tag as part of the, I mean, the module is the tag, but they don't have a static module value. They pretty much did what we said we think people should be allowed to do, which is once you put it onto your namespace, it's free for all for whatever, however you want to structure it.
Yeah. Okay. I think I'm in agreement with everything then. That just put it in the module path and update or put it as a component in the path after the module and soften the language.
Yeah. I think the thing I want to make sure of is that however you structure it, you need to make sure that you have the same number of static values in front of your stuff, that you don't have a dynamic value early in your path that can potentially collide with another thing's static value. Because in those cases, if they had another API that was history / something else that was not the tag, then you could potentially have a tag value that is whatever your something else was. So that's the only thing I want to be careful of. But that's on the folks that design their APIs to worry about. And we can worry about that as we do our stuff. All right. Thanks, Jory. And I'm guessing Sajay is probably about to jump off as well.
Yep. I gotta go as well.
All righty. This one might generate a little bit of discussion here.
That's always my goal.
We don't have a PR anything to look at here, so I don't know. I'll just stop sharing at this point and take it away, Jeff. What do you got?
This was a discussion that had come up elsewhere, and this was just sort of building on the crazy idea of essentially if you want to, I don't know, the use case come up because someone is trying to build crazy registry things, passing in additional data to the registry so the registry could do dynamic logic. All sorts of crazy bad things, but hey, it was a fun use case. But kind of, I'm trying to think, there was a registry out there that does like dynamically built containers on pull. And essentially you have a dynamic tag and you pass in, let's say, you pass in what packages you want as part of the tag. And then therefore pull this image with, colon, bash, JQ, blah, blah, blah. And then it will automatically build those things into an image and pull. And so this was kind of well, the only way we have to pass data is by tag. It would be interesting if we could actually support query parameters. So that way you could do a Docker push, some image, question mark, TTL equals 15 minutes. That TTL actually gets pushed back on the push. And then, hey, maybe now the registry can support, automatically removing the image after that TTL. Or on a poll passing a cooldown time such that, hey, give me the latest tag, but with a cooldown of, 12 hours. So that way I actually want what latest was 12 hours ago in the way that like NPM will do package updates. So there's a few interesting use cases around this. Would love to do maybe, I don't know, some kind of proposal around it. Just wanted to talk through the idea a bit to see, what people may or may not think about it. So, because this is kind of a open-ended way of passing information from the client back to a registry. Entirely optional. Like some registries may not support it. They might. It doesn't clash with sort of the query parameters that we already defined on some routes because with like the bulk manifest push, you can kind of specify additional tags like that just becomes part of the query parameter that's passed. So yeah, that's kind of the use case.
So the one gotcha I'll throw in there is that we don't have a reference spec right now.
This would require, doing the reference spec that we had talked about last week.
Yep. Actually approving that working group, which would be an interesting one. And I can see some use cases for query parameters if we allow the reference spec to somehow reference content inside of an OCI layout or reference content on a pull-through proxy, because we need to be able to pass the upstream registry name in there or referencing stuff in each of those cases. So if we had a way to mark that as a syntax with a query parameter, that would be interesting to me. Jeff, you're getting sun silenced twice in a row.
I don't really know if that just means this is really great things people are pondering, or they're just really hoping this goes away.
I imagine they're all thinking that this is a really cool idea, but how much is going to break when we implement it?
Brandon distracted me by sending a link to a really old thing. So
That is the working group suggestion that I think Jeff was saying we would eventually have to push through if we wanted to do it. Just
um,
because we don't have a reference spec today. Go ahead, Derek.
for the reference spec though, what was intended to be the output of that? Like a new spec or specific changes to the distribution spec? Create a reference dash spec with format specifications. Okay.
Yeah, I was pushing for a new spec.
But I don't think it was necessarily. What was it necessarily defining anything new, or is it more cataloging state of the world kind of a thing?
The way I was directing it, I think, and I can go back and look and see if I didn't phrase it well enough over there, is that I want to have something that documents the world as it is today, but also documents ways that it could be extended in the future. And so just like we have in distribution today, we documented that the underscore is that thing that once you put that in there, you're outside of the normal namespace and you can do your own stuff over there. I was hoping we can document, okay, these are reserved fields and tags and other parameters here that once you see this character, you know you're off in some kind of space where future extensions could be made to the spec. As much as we want to try to document as is today, there are multiple implementations today, myself and a bunch of the stuff over on the Scopio Podman side, where we start putting schemas in front of our paths. And I think not even that, I've seen in other places as well, where you put an OCI : / in front of the path to denote that this is going to be a OCI layout instead of a registry you're talking to.
That was one of my concerns on reference spec, is that it's going to become more of a political issue than the technical one, which there's a lack of agreement about the schemes.
So I know a lot of people have done different implementations of that are incompatible with each other. So it'd be nice if we find a way to do compatible. Yeah, we see multiple in BuildKit today with those schemes. So if we were to document some of them that started to get some coalescing, even if we don't, just noting that there are implementations doing it so we don't implement something in our reference spec that breaks that usage from all the other implementations would be good. So in other words, even if we don't standardize what those schemas are, to document people are using schemas and that you should be careful there be dragons within our documentation of spec would be good.
So to try to bridge this to the original comment about adding these query parameters to the reference/reference spec, is the concern there that we're just creating more fragmentation in the reference for the UI? I think at least on the containerd side, we tried to butt out of it a little bit in terms of like scheme and just like we're trying to not worry about what the CLIs and stuff are doing from like a UX perspective. Um, and that that what Jeff sent there, I mean, to me it kind of feels like a UX thing. I mean, how that actually flows through the system, whether that flows all the way into a container runtime and all the way to a registry versus like just some parameters that maybe gets boiled down to an extension in the container runtime and sent up, or I don't know. I was just curious about like what the scope of that is kind of intending.
Mike jumped off before I could use his favorite word, which was a pod spec. Um, but there have been folks that have been pushing on different directions. And so from the containerd standpoint, I think you're right. Containerd doesn't care about what the reference syntax is. They receive it already parsed and just run it as a container. They're at a lower level than that. But there are a lot of tools out there that are all OCI conformant, and this reference string is at least some variant of a reference string is used amongst a whole bunch of tools out there, whether it's, stuff that Sajay is working on. Thanks, Sajay. Good to see you this week. Or any of the rest of us that are all having pointers to images out there. I think there's a case where there can be some conformance between them. A little bit of consistency.
Yeah, and I'm not advocating against consistency. I was just more wondering if it's two separate problems right now. One is like a CLI UX problem, and the other is like, well, how do we pass like TTLs and cooldowns over the distribution spec, which to me would be maybe stuff we could just add to the distribution spec regardless of whether or not we have a reference spec and regardless of what the user experience is for setting those.
There'd definitely be a bridge there. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I was just thinking like in terms of passing them, we should be able to just tack on the query parameters to the back of the registry URLs. And so at that point, the registry can sort of choose to parse them or ignore them as is. Like I wouldn't make it a header or a new field or anything else. It would just be, if a client sends a TTL query parameter and your registry knows what to do with it, great. If not, great. This is sort of just defining a way to pass data. It doesn't necessarily enforce that a client must do it or that the registry must honor it. It's more of making it possible for these things to be passed.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what we did with the namespace stuff. Like we want to pass this in. If registries don't do anything with it, that's fine. If they want to do something with it, that's fine. It's just information. And yeah, I mean, I think we could define some of those in the spec. I guess my question was like, is this more like trying to define a generic pass-through of parameters from like a reference spec all the way through to the distribution spec? The distribution spec will just point to the reference spec and say, hey, whatever you pass in this way to a reference will get translated to this in distribution or something.
Yeah, I think my personal take would be this is just defining a generic pass-through. There's no validation on the client. There's no validation on the registry. It's purely if the client gets it, the client passes it back as a query parameter. I would say there probably does need to be some clarification because there are some query parameters defined on some URLs today. And so, if I'm trying to think, looking at some of these, like I think if you are actually
Got tag and digest namespace. There are a few of them we've got out there, and so I'm
just trying to think how a client interacts with them though. Like you can't really override them, so there have to be some logic of these can't be overridden in these cases or something. But
well, that comes into a challenge of future compatibility then. That also means we couldn't add a new query parameter without worrying about breaking anybody that might potentially be passing it for any use case we don't know about. Going through my head is, what if we prefix this? What if we put just a U underscore in front of every one of the query parameter keys.
Yeah, I mean that could be an easy way of at least namespacing it to prevent issues in the future. But yeah, that goes into the reference spec.
And I mean, if they're references, then I would assume that these probably wouldn't apply generically to every registry endpoint, but rather to the reference manifest endpoints. It'd be kind of weird to just try to apply those generically to all
Yeah, it's going to be
all the blob
manifest get and
endpoints.
manifest put, I assume. Or are you thinking more than that, Jeff?
No, I mean I think all of the use cases I've thought of and others have thought of, I think probably come down to just the manifest endpoint. So I think that's probably fine to scope it just to the ones that take a reference. Which does significantly reduce the number of endpoints it works on, which is probably good, actually.
We just had the one that you added, which is the put of a manifest with a digest and a tag query parameter. But we also have the namespace when you do a pull through proxy.
I mean, if we could decide at least on the maybe the pass-through logic, whether you're namespacing it or just YOLOing it in. I mean, we could get, I think this is something we could get into containerd reference spec pretty easily so that you can send them up. I think we already probably parse it in a way that would make it pretty easy to put those on.
Does containerd have their own, or do you just point out a distribution?
For reference?
Yeah.
No. Well, yes and no. There's like the OCI stuff uses the distribution because that's like using the that's kind of what Kubernetes has defined as what they support. But outside of the OCI, we really only support canonical, the full canonical parsing of it or doing distribution. So it's always registry name, but it's really simple. It's just like it's a two-part thing. It's like registry name and path essentially, and that's it. So if containerd is for like reference package, it's like intentionally very simple, and it only applies when you're doing registry operations. It only does the bare minimum to get the path in the registry namespace.
Do you
But
have
we could add
tag and
support for
digest in there?
yes. It does support all of that, but it doesn't do things like namespace expansion, default namespacing, any any mirror logic, like none of that is in there. But it would be easy to extend. I think it just uses the Go's URL parser. Like you could very easily add support for additional parameters that just get passed through.
I feel like the Go URL parser would parse the schema on the front of the string too.
Well, I think we put a dummy scheme in front to parse it. Not because we think schemes are dummy, we just for parsing.
Because you use URL.parse.
Yeah, I mean the parser is pretty good. Oh, I can actually I don't even think Actually, we only have what we call the locator and the object. So the object is the tag or digest. The locator would just be the registry name and namespace. That might be what we end up. I'll have to look into it, but I'm sure we could support something like this.
The one that Brian linked to, the one you're using.
No, I pretty much copied what they did in Container D for that.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
it's
when we
slightly
actually do the
different.
parsing. Yeah.
Yep.
I like that your dummy scheme is literally dummy.
Well, that's the only way to get Go to parse it correctly, to parse the host correctly.
I approve. So I feel like we've listed at least like 5 or 6 different implementations of reference. So maybe we should have a standard for this.
Not saying there shouldn't be a standard. I just said it's going to be complicated.
Probably as complicated as trying to get auth to get approved.
I mean, I think having clear boundaries between the specs is good though. Like, yeah, having a reference spec could help there, but I also think that we shouldn't make that a prerequisite to make changes in the distribution spec related to it.
I think if we want to standardize the way Jeff wanted to pass the query parameters, it would be good to have that. If we're going to do that from OCI side, we need a spec that we're going to do it in. But from Jeff's request, we can do the other half of it on the distribution side of saying, hey, if your reference implementation allows you to pass query parameters, here's how you pass them. And that we can discuss our own distribution. We can do that independently, which I think we hit on the one big thing, which just we need some kind of little namespace prefix in there of the key value so you don't have a collision. Be my one thought.
Yeah. And yeah, I think that's a good idea to either define specific namespaces, or we could, like, if some of those are like standard, we can, like if TTL, for example, like it's pretty, there's not a lot of ways to interpret that. So you could just have one interpretation for it.
Famous last words.
Yeah. I was thinking it as it was coming out of my mouth. How could you possibly interpret that in a different way?
All right, Jeff, you generate some discussion.
Perfect. That's all. That's all I want. Are these things? Do they have enough broad interest to pursue? So, yeah. What would be next steps on that? Would it be to actually try to carve out reference spec, or kind of, as you said, just try to agree on some sort of a prefix and say, hey, if a registry gets query parameters in some prefixed value, we may parse them or may not, or I don't know. Yeah, updating the distribution spec to account for it, or start with the reference spec.
I feel like you'll see a faster response on distribution spec than spinning up a whole working group to define reference.
Likely.
The downside is that means you're going to have to go to all the different implementations of reference and say, hey, can you pretty please allow this in your implementation?
Well, we have to do that either way.
But we don't have a spec that we're pointing them to at that point. We just have, hey, an extra thing they can do, and hopefully they don't all do it 12 different ways.
Um, I have a quick heads up item more than something to discuss if when we're out of other topics.
We're out. You're up.
Nice. Just the AeroFS work. I think maybe since I've last been here, we did have the Containerd 2.3 release, which has initial support for the AeroFS media type. The plan was to get 2.3 out and then define or like push the spec somewhere. And I think I mentioned it last time we just brought up in the AeroFS namespace. That's where I intend to put this. It's super early, and I said it's a heads up, not a I'm asking for review. But I know Brandon, you like to maybe you'll be sitting out on your boat and you want some reading material or something. I don't know. But it's I do like opinions, especially the high level ones to start. The idea is basically to take what we added in 2.3 as the starting point. And there was already some issues or discussion in the Containerd world around how we want to do stuff. I mean, I think the two big ones that people are looking for solutions for how to deal with large artifacts as part of images and how to deal with lazy loading. So I try to address that as part of it, but it's not directly addressed with what we released in 2.3 because what we have in 2.3 is basically just if you swapped out tar to AeroFS, what does that performance look like? And I mean, I think the answer is it's pretty good. Like switching from tar GZ to AeroFS or AeroFS plus Z standard is already like a significant improvement just for performance, but it does not address anything else. So this spec right now, I try to address everything, and I don't think that's necessarily what I want to do in the first version. But at least like have a place where it's how the stuff can all fit together. And AeroFS is actually it's a little bit complicated because it can do a lot. So there's a lot of possible permutations to get things to work, all the way from like stuff like ComposeFS to what we have in Containerd 2.3, which is pretty simple. Like, hey, this is basically just if you converted a tar to AeroFS, this is what it would look like. But there's a huge range in between that of functionality. So there might have to be a point where it gets a little bit opinionated. But yeah, I'm trying to at least cover some of those cases, and it's written as taken from an OCI spec perspective. So maybe hopefully the language is a language that you understand, Brandon. I don't know, there might be, I don't know if there's enough shoulds and musts in there, but at least like, yeah, the high level. At a high level, it's introducing 3 new media types right now instead of 1. The reason is there's 3 is because they're handled differently by the runtime. So there's the normal layer, which is basically just a 1-to-1 mapping to tar. There's something called a merge layer, which is still a normal AeroFS image, except it allows all the metadata to sit in one layer. So essentially it acts as kind of like a squashed version. But it's not actually squashed because it doesn't move the data, it's just the metadata. So it starts getting into like, oh, AeroFS has all these cool abilities. What do we actually want for this? And then I defined a data only one. And I think that's the one that's not at all correct in how we would want it. But I do think we should have like a data only type that basically says this is not a file system. There's no file system metadata in here. It's just data. And like if you have a large blob of data that you want to share amongst images, or you just don't want to include it in something else, you can just include that. It could also be a collection of like files that could be deduplicated on disk. So handling that deduplication, handling the large file, that's what it's designed to do. But I don't know that the media type really makes a lot of sense for that. But yeah, that's a high level what I'm trying to do there, and trying to do it in a way that it's compatible with what we release in Containerd 2.3, and maybe some of it we can backport into 2.3 once we have it defined for But I want to get that stuff into Containerd 2.4. So whatever initial draft here is, I'm aiming for Containerd 2.4 in August. All right, that's the end of my heads up. Look or don't look. I'm not asking specifically, just so it's aware.
Give me a lot of reading material.
I know
Yeah,
it's
dude.
long, but yeah, it said like if you skim it and you don't, you ask me questions based off skimming it, I'm not going to be offended. In fact, I would encourage you not to go wordsmith it. I know that's hard for you to resist, but I would encourage you not to wordsmith it yet because it might change a lot.
On the Aerofest, DM Verity, all the other stuff that's going in there, is all of that in pure Go over on the Containerd side right now?
Yes. And I have the Go AeroFS implementation we have covers everything except for compression right now. And wait, specifically the inline compression, which is optional. But the inline compression for AeroFS as well as DM Verity is kind of the DM Verity stuff almost doesn't need to be mentioned there, other than there's some annotations that can go along with it. But the DM Verity is just kind of an artifact of the fact that we have a mountable block type, so we can add DM Verity to it. It's not a requirement, and it's not really directly related to the spec, but it makes sense to show how it would be kind of wrapped inside of it rather than it's something that would be attached outside. But for the actual AeroFS, there is a PureGo implementation that allows writing. The translation from tar will be in by Containerd 2.4 in PureGo. What else do I have going on there? Yeah, I think that's a big one. I think having those PureGo implementations is valuable, and in some cases they're faster, in some cases they're slower. They produce slightly different artifacts, which is fine from the runtime perspective. Like for example, the PureGo one, when you're translating a tar to AeroFS, the most efficient way to do it produces a slightly different artifact than if you were to create AeroFS directly from disk. And what I mean by that is like if you're streaming tar data in, you can just throw that data into data blocks on AeroFS and like store all the metadata and throw it at the end. So AeroFS has a lot of flexibility there. And the Go AeroFS implementation right now is going to be optimized more for the runtime case rather than trying to be a generic file system tool like the MakeFS AeroFS.
Very cool. Yeah, that's for me supporting on my side. That's one of the holdups of some of the stuff out there, which is when they call out to Seago or something like that. So
Yeah,
something
I mean, we have
very
that same issue right now. I mean, we're still using MakeFS AeroFS for like our first deployments of this. And I'm not pushing for replacing that super quickly because obviously it's like if you mess up the format, it's a big deal. So
yeah. Awesome. Well, with nothing from me this week, y'all have filled up the entire agenda. Way to go, team.
all right. See you all around.
All right. Just giving everybody a chance in case someone wanted to have one last word in there. But with that, we are at time. So till next week, same bat channel, same bat time. Good seeing everybody. Thanks for the folks that joined in that don't make it here all the time. And we'll be back here next time.
Later.